Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this next series of videos what we're going to be doing is we're going to be learning about Express. And I've done videos on Express before using the EJS view engine. What I want to do in this series of videos is go over how to use Express using the Express React views engine. So when you're working in the back end with Express, which is a back-end framework. So this doesn't actually build out the front end of your page. It's not a front end. This runs on the server. Okay, so again, this is back-end code versus front-end code. There's different engines you can use to generally render your website, which we'll get to that. First, let's actually just talk about how Express works. So let's actually set up an Express project, and then I think you'll have a better appreciation for what Express is actually doing. Okay, so let's share my screen. Cool. And let's see here. Let's create a new folder. Just right click over here, new folder. And we'll call this Express React. And then we will create a new folder in there, calling project 1. And what we're going to do in here is we're going to open a we're going to open this folder in the terminal, so that way we can do stuff in it. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to want to do is create a server.js file. Doesn't matter what you call it, but the idea is that this is going to be the file that kind of runs our server code. Right now it doesn't really do anything, it's just a blank JavaScript file. And the next thing I want to do is just actually create an npm project. So you should have Node installed. If you don't have Node installed, and how you can check is you just type in node-v. And see, this will tell you what version of Node you have. You should also run npm-v. And that will tell you eventually what version of npm you have. Okay? Which is the Node package manager, which comes with Node. Now, if you don't have it, then you want to go to nodejs.org. Okay? And go download it. But once you have Node installed, you should be able to run these commands. And what I want to do is create a new npm project. So I'm going to do npm init -y. -y just skips all these questions it'll ask you. So I do that, and it's going to generate a file. So I'll know that it worked because it generated this package.json file. And if you're not familiar with a package.json file, this is the file that tells Node what's going on with this project. So this is how Node knows what's going on. Right now, there's nothing important that we need to do here, but just be aware that this is a file. Okay, I'll kind of explain and come back to it as we go. First thing we're going to do is just kind of install what we're going to be using. So I'm going to install npm express. Well, actually, it's npm because we're using npm to install it. You type in the command install, and then you put a list of all the things you want to install. So we want to install Express, and then we also want to install Express React Views. Then we hit enter and let it install. And then this will take a second to install these libraries. So first it'll install Express, then it'll install Express React Views. And that's going to, right here, it's kind of taking its time. So we'll give that a moment. We'll pause. Okay, so now we can see here that it finished. So it added 250 packages. Okay, because what happens is that when you download these packages, to us we only download 2, Express and Express React Views. But what it does, it downloads not just those packages, but everything those packages depend on. But what matters is what our project. So you see now notice that this changed. In our package.json, we have these dependencies. And the cool thing about that is that all those dependencies we just installed were put in this folder, Node modules. We never have to touch this folder, but it's there. And let's say for some reason I just want to delete it. I could literally just delete this folder, type in npm install, and it'll all get installed again. Because what npm will do is look at the package JSON, see that these are the 2 libraries that my project uses, and re-downloads them. And the reason why that's important is because oftentimes when we push our projects to Git, we don't upload the Node modules folder. We upload everything but the Node modules folder. So when someone else downloads our code, they're going to run npm install, and this is where it knows what to download. Okay, so that's a little bit about npm, just so you can appreciate what goes on when you're using npm and why that package.json matters. Oh no, I totally just broke the file. There we go. Yep. There we go. I'm just going to close that before I do any more damage to it. Cool. Okay, so we have that. Now we're not going to use Express Reactive Use quite yet, but now that I've installed it and there's the node modules folder and all that good stuff, now what I can do is I can go bring in Express. So usually what you do is you create a variable const express, because that's a logical name for bringing in Express, and we use this require function. Now what the require function is, it's a function inside of Node that allows you to bring in other files. So when I type in Express, since I just typed in Express, it's actually going to go look in the Node modules folder and look for a folder called Express. So it'll, there's all these dependencies. Doesn't really matter to you at the moment, but no, I would have already passed Express. So it'll find this folder, go into this Express folder. It's going to look up the package.json in there, which says all this stuff, and then in there should be a file name somewhere. Again, you don't necessarily need to ever look at all this stuff, but just so you see what it's doing. There's a lot of information in here. Well, somewhere in there, there's the list of the file that it loads, okay? And then it loads that file in there and brings it in. So that's what's happening when you do require. It's figuring all that stuff out. It's just looking for the package.json for that particular library that's in your node modules folder. Now, if I had put in like a file name like express.js, like /, it would then like look in this folder for that file. So you can bring in your own files if you want to create like multiple JavaScript files, but that's what the require does. It just brings in stuff from the outside. So I'm bringing in Express, and then I'm going to store all the functions and objects and cool stuff that Express does. I'm storing it in this variable. So just so you can see all the stuff that Express comes with, let's actually console log what Express is. So let's console.log Express. So I want to run node, and we're going to run that node server.js. Okay, and see, this is like all the stuff that's inside express.js. Do you need to know all these things? No, but again, the point is just so you're aware, and these are just ways to double check that you've loaded it correctly. Good. Now usually what happens next is you'll create a variable called app. Const app equals, and then there's an express function, and you'll just run it. Now what does that express function store inside the app variable? Let's find out. Let's do a console.log. It's just another object with a bunch of functions. Okay, but just so you can see what the end result is. So we'll run the file and see it has all this stuff inside that object. Okay, but that's just generally the pattern. So that's how you first load up Express. And what Express is meant to be is just meant to be a server for you. So basically what you can do is you can do this, take the app, has a listen function, and the listen function allows you to specify a port. Usually you want to choose a number above, let's say 2000. So I'll just use the typical 3000. And then you're allowed to pass in a callback for what happens once the thing loads up. So we'll just do this. Console.log. Listening on port 3000. Okay, so essentially what this is happening, we're loading in Express, and then we're immediately starting a web server that listens on port 3000. But that's all it does right now, okay? And that doesn't really do much for us. But just so you can see it in action, let's run it so you can see the port in action, the server in action. So I run it, and see it says it's listening on port 3000. So now if I open up a web browser, so let's open up Google Chrome. Okay, I'm gonna go to localhost, which represents my local computer, and I'm gonna go to port 3000. And see it says cannot get. Now the reason why it says cannot get is because I never specified what happens when you go there yet. But I know it's working because I see this. Like if the server was off, so let me turn off the server so you can see the difference. So I turn that off with a Control-C. I go here and I refresh. See, I get this instead because it's not getting anything from the server. Just so you can see when is your server running versus when your server is not running. So good, we started a server. So what's going to happen is that people are going to go send requests to our server, and we need to define how our server responds. And we do that by creating what's called a route. So a route is like, if this is requested, do this. So the way we do that is we do app dot, and then you put the name of the type of request it is. So usually when people go to your website, they're going to be making what's called a GET request. They're trying to get information from your website. So I'm going to do app.get. And then what you do is you pass in a string as to what the URL is. So I'm going to just put a slash. That just means localhost 3000, the root. Okay? The root. The root. The root is on fire. Okay? And then you pass in a callback. Now this callback is going to be passed in two pieces of information. Okay? The request, I always forget if it's request response. I think it's request and response. So it's going to be passed the request object and then the response object. You can call them whatever you want, but that's generally the order is going to be, and we'll confirm that in a moment because to see will work or won't. Okay, and basically these two objects have everything you need to send a response. So I can do response dot send, meaning send a response, and then in here I can specify what I want to send back. This doesn't do anything too crazy. It's just say, hey, I'm going to say send hello world. Okay, so cool. So what does that do? It says, hey, if a request goes to the root, respond with hello world. That's literally all that says. Let's try it out. Well, actually, let me start the server first. So let's go node server.js. The server's running, listening on port 3000. Let's go back over here to port 3000. This would be the root route. Hello world. Neat. Now let's say I do, and again, all your routes should be before the listener. So just to kind of label things. This turns on our server. These are our routes. Cool. And then there's another thing called middleware. Because maybe there's something that you want to happen, like there's actions that you want your server to do before it actually hits one of the routes, before it sends its response. So what you do is you would put these functions over here before all your routes, and this is referred to as the middleware, because it happens, there's a request that's sent to your server, a bunch of stuff happens that you want to happen, and then you respond. So this middleware happens in between the request and the response, so it's called middleware because it happens in the middle. And generally you'll notice that when you see these middleware, it's always like using the term app.use. Okay? So it just means app.use, and it just means use whatever's inside this function. And then it'll just use it, then go on to the next one, on to the next one, and then go to your routes. Okay? Right now we don't need any yet. Okay, cool. Routes. Okay, let's just do a few more routes just to kind of give you guys the vibe. App.get. Now if I did this as like /cheese. Okay, actually let's make that a string. Okay, and then I have to pass in the callback with the request and the response. Okay, and then it's response.send. This is another route. Okay, cool. Let me restart the server, because you have to restart the server each time. There is something you can download called, which we should download. So you can type in npm install nodemon. What this does, it'll restart your server every time you make a change to it, so that way you don't have to keep closing the server and turning on the server over and over again every time you make a change. So we'll just install it real quick. It's we'll pause this while that installs. So that is done installing. So now instead of running node server.js, we can run nodemon server.js. And now see, it's watching, so which means that when it looks, if it sees any change to any JavaScript, module JavaScript, or JSON file, it'll restart the server. So as now we can test out our routes. So again, here's the root route again, but let's try that cheese route. See, since I specified cheese, the route has cheese at the end. See, this is another route. Okay, so these are static routes. I'm actually specifying what the route is. You can also do what's called a dynamic route. And the way that works is like this. If I do app.get, and then I did /cheese/variable. Actually, we'll just say my param. This is referred to as a URL parameter. So you're passing information via the URL. Okay, so when Express sees this colon here, they're like, oh, it's a URL param. So whatever's in there in the route, that's a variable we should store. So then we do our callback request. Again, the request object represents all the information about what the request. And the response is the object with all the functions, so you can respond. And now I'm going to do response.send, but this time I'm going to respond with that param. I'm going to send back the very variable you sent us. So how do I do that? In the request object, okay, there is an object called params. Okay, and params has all those different URL params. In this case, we have a key called myParam. That's whatever is here in the URL. Okay, so if I do this, myParam, again, I save it, see, it's like nodemon restarts the server. So if I go to /cheese/Gouda, I get back Gouda. Now if I say Gouda2, I get back Gouda2. So that gets stored in that variable. And I can do as many as I want. So I can do, you know, myParam2. And then I will console log that as well. myParam2. Oh, actually I have to do request .params.myParam2. Save. Okay. Little pro tip, if you want to be typing in request.params and all the time, what you can do is if you know what params are in there, I could just destructure them to begin with. So I can just do like const myParam2 equals request.params. So what that'll do is it'll pull those two properties out of this object and store them in those variables. So that way I can do this. And I don't have to do all that typing every time I want to use them. myParam2. Yay for destructuring. If you don't know what that is, watch my destructuring masterclass video. It's very helpful to reduce the amount of typing that you do. So now if I go this, I go Gouda2, and then I go Gouda3. So this is technically myParam1, and this is myParam2. Let's go to that URL. It doesn't like it. Why doesn't it like it? Cheese, Gouda2, let's take a look. myParam2. Save. Request.params. Let's read the error again. Error invalid, status code. Gouda2. res.send. Oh, okay, that's right. Got it. I see. It's not a console log. Here's what I want to do. Backticks. Because basically I was sending a second argument to the function, to the send function, and the send function takes a response code as a second argument. Not gonna go there. myParam. So I'm sending back a string with these things inside of it. My param2. There we go. So let's try that again. And there you go, GUI 2, GUI 3. Okay, so yeah, that's params. I could also Google a query. So there's also another, in the request, there's an object for queries. Now queries I don't specify here in the URL because it's not part of the URL structure. Okay, I'll show you how, but the queries exist in this object. Would be request.queries, or query, and we'll say .cheese. Okay. Now, how would I make that happen? Well, in my URL, I would put a question mark. That means I'm doing a query. I would say cheese equals Gouda 3. Okay, so this is my query. So in my query object, there's going to be a property called cheese because it's in my URL, and that's what I put in my code. So Gouda 3. Okay, that's basically this code over here. Okay, cool. So that's how you build routes. You can use URL params, you can use queries, and you can literally do any logic you want in the route. Okay, and then send back whatever you want. That's all fun and good. You know, you can go, if I want to, I can send just back an object. So I can just be like, okay, let me just send back request.query. And I'll just send that back. Okay, let's try that out. Okay, and see, I just get back the query, which is cheese. Okay, so you can make an API. So with this by itself, you can sit there, collect data, and send back data that you can use in your front end if you wanted to. Okay, but what I want to teach you how to do is how to use Express React Views. So in the next video, we're actually going to load up Express React Views so that way you can actually build pages that render on your server. Now, we'll talk more about that in the next video, but basically, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I'll see you guys in the next video.